the zero product property says the only way to multiply two things and end up with 0 is to have one of those things be 0 itself. So what we're going to do here is when I multiply these two parentheses, and notice they equal 0, that tells me each parenthesis is going to be 0. So in other words, I'm going to say 2d plus 6 equals 0, or 3d minus 15 equals 0. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve that first equation. So I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. So then I get 2d equals negative 6. Divide both sides by 2. D equals negative 3. I'll do the same thing on the other equation. I will add 15 to both sides first. So 3d equals 15. Now we'll divide both sides by 3. D equals 5. So we get two answers. D equals negative 3 or 5. That's usually how we write it then. Let's take a look at another problem on example 5. Now in example 5, I don't have it equal to 0. And I don't have two factors. So what do I have to do? First off, anytime you're solving a quadratic, you want to make it equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is I like to keep my squared term positive too. I want my quadratic term to be positive. So I'm going to move the 3c to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 3c from both sides. So then we get c squared minus 3c equals 0. Now, let's factor that. The left side. Let's factor the left side. Notice there's a c in both terms. So I'm going to go c parentheses c minus 3 equals 0. Now you got the zero product property. Now I have two things multiplied together that gives me 0. So I'm going to say c equals 0. Oh, that works out nice because your first term, you're done. C equals 0. Or c minus 3 equals 0. So we end up adding 3 to both sides. And we get c equals 3. So my answer is c equals 0 or 3. There's your answer. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more that are similar to that. Here we have a trinomial. Now the problem with taking the square root of both sides, you've got this y in here, don't you? So if you've got a y squared and a y, you can't use the square root property. What happens is we're going to factor this left side. So that's a trinomial, so I'm going to go two parentheses. I know I got y and y. I know my two numbers I pick have to multiply to negative 24. They have to add to 5, which tells me my bigger number is positive and my smaller number is negative. So I'm going to do some guessing and checking here. So I'm going to go negative 1 and 24. That adds to 23. Negative 2 and 12. That adds to 10. Negative 3 and 8. That adds to 5. There's our two terms. So y minus 3, y plus 8. Now we do it like we did on example 4. I set each parenthesis equal to 0. So y minus 3 equals 0, or y plus 8 equals 0. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. So y equals 3. I'll subtract 8 from both sides. So then we get y equals negative 8. So my answer is y equals 3 or negative 8. So that stuff we learned last chapter is going to come back here. We're going to do a bunch of factoring on this. Now let's take a look at example 7. in the last example, I want one side to equal 0. It doesn't equal 0, does it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 9x from both sides. And I'm going to write it in standard form. So I'm going to say 3x squared minus 9x minus 12 equals 0. Well, notice 3 is a factor of every single term. I'm going to factor that 3 out to make my life easier. So 3 times x squared minus 3x minus 12 equals 0. Then I want to factor again my quadratic. So I'm going to make two parentheses. I want two numbers that multiply to negative 12 but add to negative 3. So what multiplies to negative 12 would be 1, and negative 12, well, notice that adds to negative 11. If I go 2 and negative 6, that adds, you know what? I just noticed I made a mistake. Sorry about that. I didn't factor the 3 out. Minus 3x minus 4. Sorry about that. So now, negative 4 and positive 1 equals negative 3. So now we're going to say 3 equals 0, which I know is not true, so I put a not in there right away. And then I say x minus 4 equals 0, or x plus 1 equals 0. So if you multiply three things and they equal 0, one of them has to be equal 0, but it's not the first one. So then we just solve the other two. So then we're going to add 4 to both sides. So then we get x equals 4. And over here, we'll subtract 1 from both sides. And x equals negative 1. So x equals 4 or x equals negative 1.